Welcome back to Amigurumi 101. In this video, I'll be discussing how to fasten off in two different ways, the standard and the invisible. First things first, why do you want to fasten off pieces? So currently, if I was to pull on the working end of my yarn, I would end up frogging a bunch of stitches. And I would be able to frog them infinitely until I reached my first row, and then just wouldn't have any stitches left over. So when you fasten off a piece, what happens is that you essentially lock all of your stitches in place. That way they don't become frogged because you pull on an end of the yarn. All right, so first way I'm going to show you is the standard way. So when you're done with your piece, you usually want to leave a tail, especially if the instructions indicate that you're going to need a tail for sewing. They'll indicate that you should keep a long yarn tail. So over here, I'm not going to be sewing really this piece. This is just meant as an example, so I don't have to worry about leaving a long tail. So I'm just going to cut it right about over here. All right, so I've cut the working end of my piece so that the tail is like this. All right, so if I want to fasten off, all I have to do is take my working loop and pull until that tail comes through the other end. And then I just tug it a little bit and I have successfully fastened off. That is the standard way of doing it. That's it, that's all. That would be the end of the story if you are okay with the top portion of this kind of sticking out. I compare this to the way that a cinnamon bun looks. When you're wrapping it, there's always that outer layer that kind of juts out a little bit. So usually you wouldn't care about this if you have the end being sewn to another piece so that the seams are kind of closed off and you don't see the ends. However, if you're sewing this like on top of a piece rather than sewing these edges all down, you'd want to round that out so it doesn't look like that little bump is sticking out there. So the invisible way of fastening off would follow the same steps that you just did. However, now you're going to kind of seal off this end over here so it looks like a more seamless finish rather than, again, having this piece kind of jutting out. So in order to do the invisible method, what you're going to do is take your working tail of this yarn and you're going to thread it through your tapestry needle. All right. There you go. Once you have that, what you're going to do is count 2 stitches ahead. So here is where you just finished off your piece, the next stitch, and then the stitch in front of that. That's where you're going to focus. So what you're going to do is take your tapestry needle, insert your needle behind the second stitch ahead of you, and then pull that through. And then you're going to take your needle and insert your needle into the center of the stitch where the yarn originally came from. So if I loosen this up a little bit, this yarn came through the center of this loop. So that's where I'm going to stick my needle, back through this loop where the yarn was coming from. And then when I pull this, as you can see, rather than having that giant jutting out portion, I now have a smoothed edge on this side, rather than that cinnamon roll. And there you go. 2 ways that you can fasten off, the standard and the invisible fasten off.